I gave them full, I think that's one, full 15 FL. So, yeah, last semester. And what I'm going to do is, as the key is already there, and you can see it posted online too, I'll just go through and sort of show you the rules and things that you have to do in order to solve these questions. So this first question that you're asked to factor that. Always you want to look to see if you can get a common factor. In this one, both numbers are divisible by a 5 and by an x. So if I factor those out, if I divide each of those by a 5 and an x, I come up with x plus 5. So those are my factors. In question number 2, you're looking to find two numbers that multiply to negative 54 and add to negative 1. There aren't any. And so this question here you can't really factor. I think the answer key says that it's prime that you can't factor. The next one is similar kind of thing, but again, when you're looking to factor, always see if you can take something out. And on this question, you can factor out an x. So once you factor out an x, you're left with this, but then this you can probably go further. So you're looking for two numbers that multiply to a negative 84, and they have to add to a positive 5. And I found the numbers to be 12 and 7. I guess a positive 12 and a negative 7. I plug them in there and you can check, and that one works out. The next question, you can either do this one, it's a 3-term, so it's a trinomial. You can either use the AC method or you can use the guess and check method. It looks like I chose the guess and check method, but if you go with the AC method, over here I'll do that. 20 times minus 9 would be negative 180. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 180 and add to a negative 3. I'm thinking 15 and 12. What's 15 times 12? 150. Yeah, that's it right there. 15 and 12. So it has to be a negative 15 and a positive 12. So I could rewrite this original equation as 20z squared minus 15z plus 12z. You see where I'm getting those numbers? Minus 9. And then group factor, I can take a 5z out of both of those, leaving me with 4z minus 3. And then I can take, it looks like a positive 3 out of the next two, leaving me with 4z minus 3. This and this matches, so I can factor them out. And I'm left with 5z plus 3. Okay, so AC method works fine. I just did a guess and check. Well, I guess those should have been z's instead of x's. Next question. Again, you can use the guess and check method or the AC method. I multiplied 8 by negative 9 and got a negative 72. So I was looking for two numbers that multiplied to that and added to a positive 6. The numbers came to 12 and minus 6, and I plugged those in there. Then I group factored, and both of those were the same, so I could pull them out front, and I was left with 4z minus 3. Okay, that's the first. Okay, next page. So in this first one, I just did a guess and check, because I saw the 9, and that's a perfect square number, so is the 4, and I thought maybe this was a perfect square. And so I just split the 9x squared into 3x and 3x. I split the 4 into 2 and 2, and I FOILed it to check the middle term, and I did come up with 12. The next one is just two terms. I split the y into y. The 49 is one of those perfect numbers. Splits into 7 and 7. One's positive, one's negative. Next one, a similar kind of question, but in this one you could factor something out first. So you could factor out, in this case, you could factor out a whole 6. I initially tried pulling out a 2, then I pulled out another 3. But originally I could have pulled out a 6, and then if I pulled out a 6, I was left with this. And then 64 and 49 are perfect numbers, so I split the 64 to 8 and 8, and the 49 into 7 and 7. One's minus, one's positive. All right, now I get to solve an equation. So I have x squared minus x equals 20. To solve any quadratic, typically I want to bring everything over onto one side and make it equal to 0. If I do that, then I can factor this trinomial. It comes out to this. And then I use that principle of zero products, where if I have something times something else that's equal to 0, then either x minus 5 is 0 or x plus 4 is 0. And then I solve each one of those equations. So I'd add 5 to both sides. Same thing here, I'd subtract 4 on both sides and I'd come up with that. Next one, number 10. This is how to find the x-intercept. And to find an x-intercept, that's the point where y is equal to 0. So I plugged a 0 in for y right there. And then I looked to see if I could factor that. And sure enough, I can factor it right to those. You could have gone 2 times negative 49 is negative 98, and look for two numbers that multiply to negative 98 and add to a negative 7. And I think those turned out to be 14 and 7. And it would have to be a positive 14 and a negative 7. And then you could have group factored with that. I did the guess and check and got this. Then same thing, principle of zero products. Something times something else equals 0. So either 2x plus 7 is 0 or x minus 7 equals 0. I subtracted 7 on both sides here to come up with this. Then I divided both sides by 2. On this side, I would have just had to add both sides by 7. Okay, the next question. If an object thrown upward, they give you a formula right there, or an equation. Find the number of seconds before the object hits the ground. So in other words, they want me to set h, the height, equal to 0. So I made it equal to 0, and then this is just a quadratic. So to solve that, see if you can factor a common factor out. I did, and I got 16t. And then it left me with 1 minus t. And then just like we always do, if it's equal to 0, then either 16t is equal to 0 or 1 minus t equals 0. 16t equals 0, I divide 16 on both sides, and I'd get t is equal to 0. And on this side, I just added t on both sides, and I got positive t is equal to 1. Okay, so at a time of 0, it's on the ground, and a time of 1, it would be on the ground. It would actually get thrown up and come back down. So this spot here would be 0, and this spot here would be 1 second. All right, so now moving on to the next chapter, I think. This one says multiply and simplify. First, you need to factor each part. So the x squared I can't factor, but the x squared minus 4 is a difference of squares. This one, two numbers that multiply to 40, add to negative 13. I came out to negative 8 and negative 5 here. And then this one, it's looking for a common factor. I pulled a common factor of x out, left with x minus 5. And then I looked to cancel stuff. So there was an x minus 8 cancels with that one. X minus 5 cancels with that one. Here's an x, and I canceled one of the x's on the top. So on the top, all I was left with was an x, and on the bottom, all I was left with was that x plus 8. So that was my answer. Next page, a similar question, but they say divide. So I needed to take this second fraction and flip it over. And what I also did at the same time was I factored things out. So I factored a negative 3 out of this one to come up with this. And on this one here, I factored out a 7. When I did that, I got a 3 minus x as a factors that could cancel. And then 3 divided into 9 3 times. And then 3 divided into 21 7 times. Oh, and then 7 divides into itself 1 time. So all I really had in the end was this negative sign out front and a 1. So my answer was negative 1. Next question, I need to find a common denominator. I'm adding. So I looked for a common denominator between 24 and 18. I did the factors over here, and I came up with a lowest common multiple of 72. So to 24, I had to multiply 3 to get 72. So I multiplied 1 by the 3 to come up with the 3. Then with 18, I had to times that by 4. And so then I had to multiply the 7 by 4 to come up with 28. Now that I have a common denominator, I can keep that and then add the numerators. This next question, it asks what the lowest common multiple would be. If my factors are only t and t plus 8, then that's my common denominator. I can't separate these because they're in brackets, right? So I can't say that this t is already included there, because this t here is included with the 8, so this is one factor, and I can't break it up. Okay, the next question I was asked to add, since they have a common denominator, I just added the top stuff. And then the top one is a trinomial, so I factored it. Two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to negative 8 were negative 6 and negative 2. And then the two m minus 2's canceled, leaving me with an answer of just m minus 6. That was my answer. Okay, next page, this one. A little bit more involved, this question, because I had a difference of squares here. So x minus 1, x plus 1. This one here, I factored an x out, and so I was left with this. Then I noticed that this factor was very similar to this one over here. And so I factored out a negative 1. And so I changed this factor here to x minus 1, but notice that this positive changed to a negative. And that's one thing you can do if you switch a factor around like that. Then I had to get a lowest common denominator, and it looked like it had to have an x minus 1, and an x plus 1. So I made sure that first one had that. The thing that I had to include was this x. So to the original x, I multiplied another x. To the second term here, this term here, it doesn't have an x plus 1. So I had to include it on the bottom and on the top. Once I had a common denominator, then I just had to add all of this top stuff. And notice that this one was a minus 6x. So when you FOIL that, you had to be careful with the, right here, I guess I did that. Careful with the terms that you come up with. Okay, in the end, I came up with minus 5x squared from these two, minus 6x. Over here, I factored an x out of that, leaving me with a minus 5x minus 6. And on the bottom, there was an x there, so I canceled those two x's out. So my final answer was just that. Next question, same kind of thing. I needed to factor this bottom one into different squares. I factored this bottom one, two things that multiply to 4, add to 5. And then I looked at the factors and tried to find a lowest common denominator. So it'd be x minus 4, x plus 4, and an x plus 1. So to this original one, I multiplied an x plus 1. If I did on the bottom, I had to do it on the top. Same thing with this one. It doesn't have an x minus 1. So where did I include that? Oh, it didn't. No, it didn't have an x minus 4. And so I included that on the top. Actually, on my key, I forgot to write that in right there. Okay, but now I have a common denominator, so I wrote it once, and then I wrote all of this stuff up here, down there. And then this was a minus 5x plus 20. I collected like terms. I got this. I would have probably tried to factor that, but there are no two numbers that multiply to 20 and add to negative 4. So this would be my final answer. Number 19, solving a rational equation. Find a lowest common denominator or lowest common multiple. There's an x and a 3, and this one would have a 1. So my lowest common multiple was a 3x. So I timesed each term. Oh, I lost some of this stuff. I timesed each term by 3x. So here the x's would cancel, so I'd be left with 6. Here the 3's would cancel, I'd be left with 2x. And on this side I have a 3x. Then I would have subtracted 2x on each side, leaving me with x is equal to 6. Last two questions. This one here is an equation. I factored this first one. It's a difference of squares there. So it's an m minus 5, m plus 5. Then I found a lowest common multiple, which was m minus 5, m plus 5. And I multiplied each term by that. That's the I hate fraction rule. M minus 5's cancel, so I was left with this 6 times by the m plus 5. It's right there. The m plus 5's canceled. I was left with a negative 8 times m minus 5. Notice I included the negative and the 8. So I put the monomial first and then the binomial second. Is equal to, and on the other side the whole thing canceled, so it just came out to 2. Okay, I used the distributive property to come up with this line, collected like terms to get to this line, subtracted 70 on both sides to get this, and then finally I divided both sides by negative 2, and I came up with m is 34. The last question was a similar triangle question, and you can read through here, but I just labeled all the triangles, and what we're looking for the shorter leg of the left triangle. We were looking for that x. So I just chose to use 75 and 25. So there's my 75 and 25. And then an x, there's my x. And the appropriate side on the other side was a 7. Then I multiplied both sides by 7x. And so the x's would cancel here, leaving me with 7 times 75. I don't know what that is. Just a minute. 35, 3, about 525. So this would be 525 is equal to the 7's cancel, and I'd be left with 25x. Then I divide both sides by 25. And when I do that, I think I come up with, I don't know, 21. So x comes out to being equal to 21. All right, hopefully that helps you in studying for the exam.